Hi, Karen.
Hey, Tristan. Hi, everybody out there. Welcome to the Robust American Love Speaker Series brought to you by the Walt Whitman Initiative. We are so happy that you are here, and we are thrilled to have you here, Tristan Pullen, to introduce a fantastic play that you have been working on, enact it. We'll talk about it. Songs of Memories, a Whitmanic Queer Discovery is coming your way, folks. And I cannot wait to engage with Tristan and the wonderful team that he's brought here today. It's going to be a great hour. Just a quick introduction to the Robust American Love Speaker Series. This is something that we've just started up. I believe, Tristan, you are the fourth presentation. So we're delighted to have you as part of this uh, slowly snowballing series of public facing talks. We're really excited to bring a speaker series. Notice that it's speaker and not lecture. And we wanted to present timely conversations on Whitman's life, work, and legacy that weren't the predictable academic route. So, point of fact, we have this wonderful um, uh, discussion of Tristan's latest play and actors acting it out. It's fantastic and fabulous. So please join us every Thursday. We've got a great lineup. There's a couple of things coming up that you might want to mark your calendar for. September 10th, Dee Quee, who is a member of the Walt Whitman Initiative, a very active historic preservationist in Brooklyn, is going to be speaking about Whitman's 2 cents on COVID-19 recovery. She's really going to focus on the healing of New York City in a Whitman style, using Whitman's quotations and poetry and his philosophy to kind of guide us out of this moment of COVID-19 madness we're living in right now. And the next week, September 17th, Brian Selznick, who is a Caldecott winning illustrator and author. You might know his book, The Invention of Hugo Cabret, which was made into a movie called Hugo. Brian is going to join me for a conversation on Live Oak with Moss, which I guess Tristan really affected this production as well. And we will introduce the book that we came out with last year called Live Oak with Moss out on Abrams. And Brian will bring his illustrations. I'll talk about the background of the book, the editing process, and the history that went into um, rediscovering these secret same-sex love poems that Whitman had written in the 1850s. But for now, I'm so delighted to present to you Tristan Pullen. And Tristan, I guess, it's funny. I feel like I know you forever, but I guess it hasn't been forever.
No, it really
And
hasn't.
maybe we should tell people about how we met and
Yeah.
all of this kind of, you know, came to be.
Well, I decided after undergrad that I was going to go into grad school for directing and came to the University of Memphis here in Tennessee. And this time last year, really, about September, October, Sarah Brown, my advisor at school, a fabulous instructor and mentor, had you and Brian come in to talk about Live Oak with Moss and the queer love of Walt Whitman. And it really hit me at my core. I remember you speaking, and there was this moment for this Q&A, and this thought just kept running in my head that I've always kind of thought that Whitman was queer, but I'd never heard of these poems. And that there was this duality between masculinity and femininity. And I got up, nervous, shaking, and asked y'all a question, and it kind of just took off from there. And then uh,
Kind of
we
kept
became
talking,
friends.
right? Yeah. And I remember talking to you for a long time at that party at Sarah Brown's house.
Right.
And you have a really amazing family that's encouraged and nurtured this love of theater and even this love of Whitman, right? I'm thinking about your grandmother in
Yeah.
particular.
My grandmother, she started me in theater when I was about 7, and it just ignited a flame. When I was little, I had a learning disability and really struggled learning how to read and to write. And she was an English teacher, and she used poetry to help me. It was when I got comfortable reading out loud, and she worked everything from Whitman to Brown to, I mean, anything. She'd have this huge book of poetry and say, open it up. And today's homework is you have to read five, pick five. And it started this lifelong love with poetry. And then when I got into high school, I continued theater and I did competition prose and poetry where I read poetry aloud and did that all the way until graduation. And then it just stayed with me.
I think it's amazing that she had you read the poetry out loud. That had to be foundational to your theater, your love of theater, and even this particular piece, which is called Songs of Memories, right? So there's a really oral component to this.
Mm-hmm.
Did she also introduce you to Whitman?
She did, actually. I was the other day, I was on the phone with her trying to remember the poem that she introduced me to. It was one of the songs of myself, one in the long, and I want to say it was song 47, section 47. What I read, Song of Myself, is that I'm the teacher of athletes.
Oh my goodness. Well, somebody must have introduced you to Whitman because I have read the play now many times. And I think for me, one of the most amazing things, it's a concise play, and yet you are offering a biographical overview of a gay life. It really is the story of a gay life from cradle to grave,
Right.
various stops on the way. And what is really wonderful is it's beautifully researched. You're Whitman, and he really comes to life in this play. But you also use the poetry as dialogue. So it's not just you kind of putting words into Whitman's mouth. It's actually Whitman singing his own songs. You're enabling him to do that, going back to your own kind of preparation for poetry that has an oral component to it. So there's a lot of poetry in this work.
I thought, when I started this, I thought it was vital that we had to go from the beginning of his life. As a gay man, I just recently got engaged, and it was this moment.
Yay! We have to put a shout out. That's an amazing
thing. And I just realized there were moments in my life where like I was hidden. And I said, well, then it doesn't start when you first kiss a man. It starts way beforehand. His poem, A Child Went Forth, the first thing he saw, he became. That's literally it. The first thing you see when you're born is your mother. And then it starts there. So his foundational relationships picked what would become a lifelong struggle with love, but also of ecstasy, within that love. So yeah, and I thought it was vital for this play to see the relationship with his mother, the reason why he loves her, and that first real scene.
It's such a huge part of the story. As you're speaking, I'm realizing that you are also in the story, right? Yeah. But for those that are just watching it maybe for the first time and seeing it enacted here, Whitman's relationship with his mother is very prominent, right? That's the first way we see him in this play. And I was really interested in how you gauged that very tricky relationship Whitman had with his father. And I think what's really exciting, I even think about my Whitman students here, is that you are using biographical information to really bring him to life. And can you talk just a little bit about the relationship with Whitman's mother versus his father, how you see those as quite different influences on Whitman?
Yeah, I think if we're looking through the lens of older Walt Whitman, it is the struggle between masculine and feminine. His father was the strong fist and his mother was the warming hug. And I think from everything I've read about his mother and his father, that his father was a mean man, a drunk.
You're getting that from There Was a Child Went Forth, right?
Yes.
Father, what are those words? Angry, unjust, the blow, the quick, loud word. Yes. A lot of Whitman scholarship that speculates on an abusive relationship between Whitman and his father comes from that particular moment in his poem. Of course, Whitman could be totally making this up, but it does sound like there might have been, if not physical abuse, emotional.
Emotional. Well, and I even found a letter that his brother Jeff wrote, Thomas Jeff, um, when they were in New Orleans,
That's
begging the father to write to him. And he refused and refused. And it was like this longing for affection that these grown men were wanting that they never got. And to me, I grew up in the South seeing men that way, treating their kids that way, because they thought that showing kids love would just make them weak, and actually just made another failed man. And I think that that's where all this comes in. And that scene with the mom where she says, I've always wanted to protect you and I should have tried harder. And then later on, after the father's dead, I really wanted to focus on this moment of honesty.
Hmm.
If we're really trying to tell the truth of Whitman, what did his mom think of the father?
That's really interesting too, because quite often people look at either the mother or the father, but don't think about the relationship that Whitman is built from, right? Like what happened between Louisa and Walter Sr.
Right.
Nobody really speculates on that. And
Well,
just,
that's why I put in that scene after the father dies in 99 Ryerson, is that she said, I lost my husband the day he picked up the bottle. That
which
she was
also,
doing her role as mother, not as wife.
do you want to just backtrack a little bit and frame out how you wrote this piece? Just because
Yeah.
we're avidly talking about it because we both know it and love it and we both love Whitman. But, the whole intention of this series is that everybody can get into it. So could you give kind of a basic introduction to the shape of this play? It's about 73 pages, right? So not too
Yeah.
long,
Not
but
too long. It's a one-act play. And actually, I'm going to share my screen.
great.
Can you see this, Karen?
Yes.
Okay. So how it is, I found these beautiful quotes that really became the foundation of this piece for me.
Oh my God,
Uh,
that Tennessee Williams quote, I
oh,
am taking out and framing. I have never seen that, but
you haven't? It's in A Streetcar Named Desire. It's the famous line that Blanche Dubois says. That's my play. And it fits Whitman to a T.
it
Um,
a lot of us to a T. Here,
but the
yeah, go
the
ahead.
one that really hit me the hardest was this young quote: "Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." So what I did,
And
oh,
we
and
just
here's,
had a talk on Carl Jung last week.
yes, so it's all like tying together.
No, it's so
It's
amazing.
amazing. And then my dedications to Karen and to Sarah Brown, Christina Duarte, my lovely grandmother, Rachel Finney, and of course to Walt Whitman, my first love. But what I did, here, we'll get down here, is the structure of the play is like a Greek tragedy. I wanted there to be a chorus that would sing the songs of Whitman that he could never get out of his mouth, the truth. In his last days, he tells Horace, his friend, to, when you write about me, make sure you do not prettify me. Tell the dams and the hells. And that's what I was trying to do, is to honor Whitman. So what I do is I set up a prologue.
If I could just frame that for
Yeah.
people who don't know who Horace Traubel is, at the end of Whitman's life, Horace Traubel was just a huge fan of Whitman's that decided to write down every word that Whitman said. So this is again an example of how Tristan is digging in to research and scholarship to ground this play. So I thought it was really amazing you included Horace in the play itself.
Right. Well, in my mind, how this all plays is that it's set on March 20th, 1892, which is 7 days before Walt Whitman dies.
6 days, yeah.
And, we've all heard the old saying that right before you die, your life flashes before your eyes. And I wanted this to be a re-examination of why Whitman died alone. So what I've done is I let this Greek chorus speak for Whitman to the audience so that we can understand what's really happening. And we travel, if you see, we go all the way back to 1825. then to 1831, about the time he started working in the printing press.
And just
Uh,
to frame it for our viewers, Whitman is born in 1819 and he
1819.
dies in 1892. So
Right.
this is really early Whitman, the type of Whitman that usually gets ignored. So I thought it was really neat that you had Whitman as a child with his mother in 1825. So he would have been like 6 years old.
Right, exactly. And then we go into Louisiana when he was in New Orleans in 1848. We're going into the death of his father and the year that he publishes Leaves of Grass in 1855. The transformation. This is where I say that Walt Whitman became liberated, where he almost became more of himself sexually, more freely. And then we go to the Bohemian Bar, Pabst beer cellar. We go when he goes into DC, into the Civil War, and then we end right back where we begin. Well, and then there's Oscar Wilde that comes in, which was a historic, true visit that happened between the two of them. And then we end up where we started on March 20th, 1892, 6 days before he dies, to for a re-examination of for him to really understand where he went wrong.
So, really, snapshots from his life, putting Whitman together from little snippets, like important moments that you recognize in the creation of his. It's really the focus on his sexuality, right? Like
Right,
on what made him and what kind of made him unhappy, I
right.
guess, later in his life too. That
I called them moments of love, whether it was good or bad. I'm retracing these moments of love to find out where he went wrong, if that's what he believes, you know. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much the structure. You know, I really wanted to follow a Greek tragedy because Oscar Wilde was quoted saying that Whitman's life was like a Greek tragedy. He was highly misunderstood. And it just dawned on me that why not? Why not tell the stories? That's where theater started. It's where these great dramas were formed. And we have, you know, these choruses that can sing his poetry and the words that Whitman wouldn't say. So yeah, that was where the structure came in. And there was this key thing. I don't know if you picked up on this, but I specifically use contemporary language. I don't try to date him
right. I thought
because
that actually was a great idea because that can get so messy and tedious, right?
it's so messy, but I wanted Whitman's life to be accessible to all.
Mm.
When you read an Oscar Wilde play, which is around the same time, it gets heady. And, you know, everyday audiences don't necessarily want to go be entertained by that. And I wanted to really zone in on something that if Joe Blow walks off the street to see this show, that he can connect to Whitman and his words.
But at the same time, I have to say you seamlessly weave in poetry as dialogue.
Okay.
So at times we do hear the characters engaging as if they lived today, but then they kind of break into the poetry and you show how the poetry actually illustrates the life, right?
Right.
As you make very clear at the end of this play, Whitman is weaving his life story in between the lines of these poems that you've selected.
Right.
So
Yeah, I wanted to really focus on when there was that transition, um, that there was this breath, if that makes sense. Last week in the episode for this, they talked about how Jung had this idea of breath and how men had the feminine breath. So I wanted that feminine breath to break up the beats of the show so
mm,
that when we have this, like, you know, Whitman's words, his actual poetry, that there's this breath of, is this love? Is this reality? Is this real? What is happening? Almost like this dreamlike sensation within it, if that makes sense.
no, that's beautiful. And it brings me back to some of the poems that I know really inspired you, Live Oak with Moss, which were secret same sex love poems that Whitman wrote in a little notebook, which he later ripped up very intimate, very personal poems. And, you know, he titles them Live Oak with Moss after a tree down south, because as we speculate, maybe his first real love affair was down in Louisiana for that short trip.
Right.
Spoiler alert, guys. Tristan has that scene happen with an African American that Whitman meets down in New Orleans, which is quite possible, as you make clear in your script, right? From lines and passages that we find in Song of Myself and other poems. But that image of the oak tree, right? That's the dominant image for these homoerotic poems. And I think that Whitman is trying to emphasize the naturalness of all sorts of love,
Right.
right? Not just the heteronormative stuff that he saw always around him, but the way that he felt and
Right.
the way that he pushed the envelope during that whole 1850s period, which, as you rightly note, he was sexually experimenting.
Right.
So very exciting that you locate him in there. And, you know, again, spoiler alert, there's a lot of passion in this play, which I think adds to the titillation and the romance, right? To actually think of Whitman having sex.
Right.
Sure, some of that us have dreamed of that somewhere, but you actually enact it, which is
Right.
a lot of fun. And speaking of enacting, I don't want, you know, time is going to fly by because I love talking to you. What do you want to do with the acting component? Should we start that now?
We
Or
can, and then we can loop back afterwards and continue our conversation with time.
sounds good.
This next part is there's going to be two scenes that are going to be read from the play, and one is the actual New Orleans scene with the lover, and this is, in my opinion, young Whitman trying to figure out exactly what his love is. He's trying to deal with the demons of his time, and then the next scene is after the father dies and he has to grapple with the loss of a father, but you see both him rejoicing in the father's death, but also mourning the father's death.
So the New Orleans scene is from about 1848,
Yeah.
when Whitman is about 28 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't come out with Leaves of Grass yet, so he's sort of a poet in the making. And then the later one is of that particular moment. And it's such an interesting thing. His father dies, but he also publishes the first edition of Leaves of Grass. So
Right.
he's kind of released from the past and initiates the future in the
Exactly.
same month, July 1855,
Yeah.
where you're anchoring that. Do you want to do one reading and then discuss it and then do the other one, or do you want to do them back to back?
We can, yeah, let's do that. We have the time.
Cool.
We'll do one reading and then we'll pause and then we'll do the second.
Sounds good.
All right. So, hello, actors. I would love for you to join. Turn on your videos. I would like to introduce everyone. Is everyone here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. So we have William Draper, who is going to be playing our Walt Whitman. We have Lance Rakes, who is going to be playing our Mel Lover. We have Toby Davis, who is going to be playing Song of Comrades. And Jordan, Ayla, and Matthew Hawkins will all be playing the Songs of Louisiana. So,
this is so amazing. I have to applaud that everybody is
yes.
here. Thank you for coming.
So Karen and I are going to mute ourselves and turn our videos off. And then whenever you're ready, Toby, begin for us.
Second episode. Date, 1848. Location, New Orleans. Projection, Louisiana Lover. A blanket, a few candles, a red box, and pillows sit center stage. Projections cover the set and transform the stage into the landscape of a Louisiana field. Walt Whitman sits on the blanket and pulls out a small leather-bound journal. He begins to write.
The sun began to set.
Whitman found himself lost in a new world of tranquility and delight.
It was the first time Walt had been to the South.
It was the first time Walt had ever seen a mighty oak tree.
He felt connected to it, almost like he was part of the tree that stood before him.
Lover, a muscular black man, enters through the cut in the tree, carrying a bag over his shoulder. He is a tall, handsome, and strong. The love and desire Whitman has for him is detailed in section 13, Song of Myself. The lover is a resilient and masculine man. However, there is a tender and feminine quality to his soul. Lover watches Walt Whitman right from afar. Walt Whitman places a twig covered in a moss into the red box. Lover smiles because he is so fond of Walt Whitman's passion.
He was inspired.
Not only by nature,
but by the touch of a man. I brought some things for us to eat from town. Here's some bread, wine, gumbo, and my mama's famous Louisiana cake.
Walt Whitman grabs some bread and a bowl of gumbo.
Slow down, mister. There is plenty there.
Will, you're muted. Try that again.
I forgot.
Slow down, mister. There is plenty there.
I forgot to eat today. I was so inspired by the landscape and the people that the words just kept flowing out of my pen.
Do you mean to tell me that you have been writing this whole time?
Yes, sir.
What inspired this poem?
All of this.
Walt Whitman looks around with his arms open as if he's worshiping his surroundings.
Anything specific?
This lonely oak tree, it spoke to me the loudest. Here, listen.
Lover moves closer to Walt Whitman. They're not facing each other. They both face towards the audience, looking through the fourth wall. The sounds of Louisiana fill the air and underscore Walt Whitman's poem. Walt Whitman looks at Lover to make sure he is ready. Walt Whitman takes a breath and smiles.
I saw in Louisiana a live oak growing. All alone stood it in the moss hung down from the branches. Without any companion it grew there, uttering joyous leaves of dark green. And its look, rude, unbending, lusty, made me think of myself. But I wondered, how could it be utter joyous leaves standing alone there without its friend, its lover near? For I knew I could not. And I broke off a twig with a certain number of leaves upon it and twined around it a little moss and brought it away. And I have placed its site in my room. It is not needed to remind me as of my own dear friends. For I believe lately I think of little else than of them, yet it remains to me a curious token. It makes me think of manly love. For all that, and though the live oak listens there in Louisiana, solitary in a wide flat space, uttering joyous leaves all its life without a friend, a lover near, I know very well I could not.
They sit for a moment in silence.
What do you think?
I don't know what to say.
Was it that bad?
No, of course not.
Walt Whitman is confused by Lover's reaction.
What do you understand of the poem?
Well, it's beautiful and a heartbreaking poem. It's about life, but it's, in a sense, about the fear of living alone. You are expressing how you don't want to be without your lover.
A moment of silence. They look at each other. Walt Whitman gets up and clears his throat.
Yes, that's it.
Why do you get uncomfortable by talking about your emotions? When you read your emotion within your poems, you sing, but you shut down if you can't hide.
Hide.
You hide behind your words so that you don't have to admit the truth.
Walt Whitman stares at Lover.
Why can't you just say what you feel?
Because it is wrong how I feel.
Walt Whitman is nervous and walks away from Lover. He walks over to the oak tree and places his hand on it.
I feel like I'm being punished because I laid with a man.
We don't have to do this anymore.
That's not what I'm saying. Do you know any other men that have feelings for other men like we do? Is it normal? Are we normal? I thought having this opportunity to get away from my family would finally give me the chance to find myself. But I've made the gods unhappy. I'm being punished because I love you.
This is the first time these words have ever come out of Walt Whitman's mouth. Lover walks over to Walt Whitman.
Do you think this oak tree grew here naturally? Did it grow naturally out here all alone?
Well, of course.
Is the act of loving a person natural?
Yes, but that's not
If
that.
you loving is a natural thing to do, what is the difference between you and the tree? You both grew up in solitude. You both grew strong, even though the environment around you wasn't always supportive. You and the tree are the same.
The tree's alone in the world. I know myself. I could never be alone.
You're wrong. The tree is not alone. God knew the tree could not bear to be alone, so he allowed the moss to grow on the tree. The world may see the tree as alone in the field, however. The reality is the moss is covering it and keeping it warm. You are the tree, Walt, and the moss is the love you need. There's nothing wrong with needing love. Just because the world doesn't understand it at first glance doesn't mean it's wrong.
I can't be pretty words. I can only write them.
No, you can be both.
That's foolish.
You can be the pretty words and write the pretty words. You can be the masculine figure your father was and love the feminine affection your mother showed you. You can be both things at once. That is natural. Look at the tree. The tree is strong like a man, but the leaves and moss are beautiful like a woman. It is natural to be both masculine and feminine. It is beautiful.
There's a pause. Lover holds Walt Whitman's face.
Just like our love is natural.
And beautiful.
Lover kisses Walt Whitman passionately. The lights slowly begin to fade as the men begin to take clothes off, caress, and kiss each other.
Not heat flames up and consumes. Not sea waves hurry in and out. Not the air, delicious and dry. The air of the ripe summer bears lightly along white down balls of myriads of seeds, wafted, sailing gracefully, to drop where they may. Not these. Oh, none of these more than the flames of me, consuming, burning for his love, whom I love.
Yay!
Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. Guys, come back up on the screen. We must talk to you. Lance and Will and Jordan. And who was the narrator? Toby, was that you?
Toby, yes.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for bringing that to life.
Thank you.
Well, can I hear from the actors how you feel about Tristan's words here? Because I guess the most interesting thing is that the lover teaches Whitman what Whitman is actually saying, right? Like Whitman is kind of, he's writing the words without having the connection to them that the lover seems to have. So the lover kind of walks him through in this really elegant way, how Whitman is like that tree, right? And the moss and everything. So Lance, that kind of put you in the spotlight. So any reaction to that persona that you were portraying there?
Yeah, I guess when we kind of workshopped this whole thing, we went into that direction, and it felt inspiring for me to inspire like what Whitman is talking about through his writing and like just like our connection. It was really fun to just go into.
And I thought you had a really good energy with Will. Will, you strike me as a young Walt Whitman. He's very believable, Tristan. You picked the right guy. So it's very difficult to read some of Whitman's poetry, and you read quite mellifluously one of Whitman's most famous poems. I saw in Louisiana a live oak growing. So can I ask you as an actor, what was that like to actually read a poem instead of reading lines? How is it different from just like reading lines in a play?
Well, first off, the first time I remember going through it, and Tristan was a huge help in getting me through the poem because I struggled quite a bit getting through it a little bit more for the inflection and just him and his personal connection to the poem. From the difference between the poem and the lines, I would say with the lines going through this scene with Lover is that Whitman is arguing within himself. His argument is never with his lover. His lover is doing what a loving heart would do for someone else who they love. Is, you know, they don't care what happens to them. They're trying to get their heart to, he's trying to walk Walt Whitman through his own problems. And Walt Whitman is is constantly battling with himself through this, because as we workshopped it, Tristan was like, he's away from his home. He's not familiar, that he thinks this is going to be his, vacation. And he's still finding himself, very uncomfortable with himself, and he's struggling, and he's hurting. And the lover is here to help him, love himself. And I think that's an excellent, transition to the poem. And the poem was hard a lot, but really the more I read it, and the more you really just let those words carry themselves. Walt Whitman already did the heavy lifting. He wrote the poem, he put the magic there. The part is just translating it and making it, believable for an audience. And I really think it's a beautiful poem, and I love it.
Thank you. I guess, Tristan, you have taught him very nicely about Walt Whitman. Those are beautiful words about Whitman. What are you thinking about what you heard them do?
I mean, I loved it. Will is one of those actors, all these actors, I've gotten to work with all of them, and they're all like this, that they don't just read something and then go away and say, oh, I'm going to do this. If it's something historical, they just dive into it and they want to know more. For example, Will was wanting to really understand the voice of Whitman, and I showed him the recording of Whitman reading the poem that's like really bad quality.
Right.
And he loved it, and he was getting it, and he really understood the inflection I was going for. And they did great. I mean, they're phenomenal. And working with them, they gave me feedback. I love collaborating with this group of people. It's amazing.
Well, Jordan, I also really admired what you did, because I think you had a very difficult role, right? You were playing is it a memory, Tristan? I'm not sure. Like, she's the Song of Louisiana, right?
So she's basically a memory.
So you can't, Jordan, you can't even crawl into a nice, comfortable character, right? Like, you have to think about sort of a force or an entity that's delivering these sonorous lines. Have you ever done anything like that before?
A little bit on and off, and Tristan made a really good point about bringing in some female voices to this male-dominated story. And one of the things that I admired most about this scene is how it discusses that you can be both masculine and feminine. There are no set definitions of what a human has to be, what defines a person in terms of masculinity and femininity. And we have all of that within ourselves, and we are all sexual beings, we are all sensual beings, and you shouldn't have to deprive yourself of your own humanity. And so that was one of the biggest things that I loved about this scene. And that last paragraph is one of the biggest parts that I loved about being able to bring that female voice into this story.
Those are really passionate lines. And Tristan, forgive me if I'm wrong, but that is the Live Oak with Moss 1, right? Like, right. Or one of the first poems.
Yeah, it's one of the first ones.
Just super passionate lines, and heard from a female voice, it emphasizes that whole conversation that you've included about gender fluidity, which, by the way, guys, Tristan is spot on with that, because a lot of Whitman's poems express a type of gender fluidity that we are still catching up to today. The crossing of gender, the crossing of the idea of genders, right? The questioning of what masculine and feminine is, and then also blending them together so beautifully. I love that this scene has poetry, it has characters, it's a narrative, but it also has that philosophy embedded in it. And lucky for us, Toby has such an awesome voice to kind of pull everything together really nicely. Toby, I know your job was not the most exciting part, but it's very important. And I appreciated your clarity and, the weight that you put on behind the words.
Thank you.
So Toby gets to shine in a minute. He's okay. Songs of Comrade. So
good. Okay.
He gets to be the shining star. So how about this? Let's get ready for the next one. Is that okay, Karen?
Yeah, I think we have to. We're at
Okay.
6:59. My goodness.
Yeah.
It's fine.
And we'll get going. Karen and I will pop away.
Okay.
Whenever you're ready. Jordan, remember just to start reading, and whenever you're ready.
Third choral dialogue. Date 1855. Location Brooklyn. Projection Breathe. Walt Whitman sits by candlelight, alone in his room. He is in morning clothes. His shirt is unbuttoned. He is lost in the all-consuming thoughts of his mind. Song of Comrades, a male lover, comes out of the tree. He sees the man in morning clothes and understands that Walt Whitman is both wounded and healing.
Here sits a man, wounded and in need of healing. He sits lost to the realities of this world. He longs to numb a pain that only time can heal. He needs someone to listen to him. I will give him that.
Song of Comrades moves toward Walt Whitman, places his hands on his shoulders, and begins to massage them.
What's on your mind?
Walt leans his head against the arm of Song of Comrades.
I keep thinking of how my father's death sucked the air out of the room. Yet when it came to his life, no one else but him was allowed to breathe.
Well, he's dead now. You can breathe freely.
Walt Whitman reminisces about the pain of the past.
It was like years of repressed weight melted off my chest. There wasn't sadness. There was a relief. His iron fist had finally released me. At that moment, it was the first time that I got to be undeniably me. I was liberated.
He puts his head in his hands. He sighs.
Death ushers in a time of reflection. The past has a way of haunting you. It reminds you of the forgotten moments of life. My father was a provider for his family, but other than a means to survive, he never gave much to his wife or children.
Why are you still holding on to him?
Because I'm terrified. I'm terrified I'll become him. He created me, and yet his life broke me. I feel like I'm still running away from a person that no longer exists.
Have you ever thought that you might be running away so fast that you might just run and become him in the process?
Walt Whitman gets up from the chair. He reaches out to Song of Comrades. It is clear that Walt Whitman wants to have sex.
I want to feel you.
Walt, we need to talk about this.
I need you to undress.
Walt Whitman starts unbuttoning Song of Comrades' shirt and kisses his neck. Song of Comrades allows Walt Whitman to touch him.
You're doing the same thing your father did. He drank to numb his pain. You have sex to numb yours. Different drugs, but the same demon.
Walt Whitman removes his hands from Song of Comrades' body.
What do you want from me?
I want you to admit you have a problem and you need help.
How do you fix the urge to run out of the very skin of your body?
Running never solves anything. He's gone. He can't hurt you anymore. He can't control you.
He is dead. But I can still feel him. I worked until my hands bled the other day because a voice told me I needed to punish myself for wanting to be with you. The other day, I began to yell at my brother Thomas, and I felt my father's voice coming out of my mouth. I had to swallow his voice like medicine that only treats the symptoms and not the actual disease. It's killing me. He is living in me.
Walt Whitman breaks down. Song of Comrades kneels to comfort him.
He may be a part of you, but he's not living in you.
I've prayed for him to die since I was a little boy. Now I feel like I've lost something that I can never get back.
Think of what you've gained.
What? A voice in my head?
No, you gained your freedom. You can be with a man. You can love a man. You can do whatever you please. Leave Brooklyn. Look, you don't owe anyone anything.
I owe my poetry to him. That's why I stay to help my family.
You only owe your poetry to yourself and the words that you create. You have ownership, no one else.
He taught me how to write my poetry, not in the sense of the actual words, but the structure. You see, he taught me how to create a blueprint for a home. He taught me how to create a solid foundation. He taught me how to build walls. And he taught me how to put simple details into the work that pay off in the end. I learned to write poetry from building houses.
I didn't know that.
No one did. It was one of the unspoken gifts my father gave me. He thought he was teaching me to build homes, but he was teaching me how to create splendors out of pretty words.
Song of Comrades runs his fingers through his Walt's hair. Walt Whitman takes a breath.
You're gonna have to let go of the past that you controlled. Take the gifts he gave you and begin paving your own path.
Walt Whitman looks around the room. He sees the red box sitting on the bookshelf. The red box is from his time in New Orleans. He opens the box. Images of the twig with moss and the journal that holds the poems of live oak with moss is projected onto the set. Walt Whitman walks back over to Song of Comrades and sets the red box on the table. He holds the twig with moss. There is a sense of hope and warmth. He can't bear to destroy it.
Live oak with moss.
What is that?
The poetry of hidden love.
You don't have to let go of everything. Just let go of what doesn't serve you anymore.
Walt Whitman grabs the journal and flips through the pages. He stops on a poem.
Oh, you whom I often and silently come where you are, that I may be with you, as I walk by your side or sit near or remain in the same room with you. Little you know the subtle electric fire that for your sake is playing within me.
He closes his eyes and brings the journal to his lips.
Hidden love.
He rips pages from the journal.
It doesn't serve me anymore.
Walt rips the pages in half and throws them to the floor. Walt looks over the pages on the ground and quickly exits through the tree. Music changes, this time more sensual. Projection, men's bodies. There are close-ups. They are having sex, but the audience should never see the full image. A shot of the hand, a shot of the lips, a shot of the hip, a shot of the butt, a shot of legs tangled together, and shots of hands clasped together.
Nice work, guys.
Wow, that was super powerful. I can't believe what you guys can do on Zoom. I want to see you in person. What are we doing in these cute?
Karen, these kids are amazing. I don't know where the University of Memphis gets their actors, but it's the best part of this school is working with these kids. They're amazing.
So just to reiterate, all the actors that you have with you are undergraduates at the University of Memphis. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And are you guys all theater majors or are you just dabbling in it?
I think most of us are, yeah.
Yeah, I think all of them are theater majors. All of them are.
I guess if you learn to do theater on Zoom, you can do anything. It's like what they say about New York, right? If you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere. But if you can express the deep felt passion that you all did on this screen, I mean, I could feel it, Tristan. You must be, it's wonderful to hear your words come to life like this, right?
They just, I was texting someone the other night, the first time we read it, and I was like, they got it. It worked. They are masters at their crafts. They are learning because of the fabulous faculty in our department how to use words to express something that's not always on the typed page. And I'm speechless. I mean, they're just so good.
And the inspirational material, because this is hard stuff, right? To actually communicate poetry. So Toby, I wanted to ask you, because you are playing a memory, right? You are the Song of Comrades in this piece. And I guess, how do you envision this playing out? Is Whitman kind of talking to himself and you are like his bubble of thought up there? Or like, where do you place yourself in this passage?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what Tristan has done is something that's like really hard, which is to like, where does the memory fit in the world that we're creating, right? So like, where is it in Whitman's head? Is it a dream? it's hard to say because, kind of the same thing with Lance's, with the lover, with the male lover. If it is Whitman, then he's arguing with himself because they keep bringing in, all of these points, and what I love about the scene, especially this scene that Tristan has written, is that there are even moments where my character is even learning, right? He's learning, like he's like Walt is coming at him, and he has to say, oh well, I never knew that's where your poetry came from, right? And so if it is Walt, then that means that he's learning things about himself that he didn't even know about himself, which I think is absolutely beautiful. So.
And what's funny is Toby and I have never actually spoken about this, but he just totally hit the nail right on its head. I mean, I struggled so hard because I feel like this play is nothing but internal conflict. So it could just be monologue with Walt, but all of these songs, all these characters are just Whitman. I put up, there's a note in the script that says, please note, all characters are a memory. They are not as they lived. They are how Walt Whitman remembers them. One could say they are all a part of Whitman. They are the songs he could never sing. So in a way, he is actually having a constant dialogue with himself, but he's allowing himself to work out his demons through different facades.
Right, a real wrestle with himself. And just to compliment Tristan a little bit on what he's doing here, if you believe in astrology, Whitman was a Gemini, sort of a double thinking person, and he thought so too. And even in Song of Myself, Whitman talks about the other I am, as if there are two of him all the time. So very interesting that there is this pairing, and Whitman kind of being his own psychiatrist in a way, right? Talking him through a really difficult subject, which is this close but abusive relationship he had with his father. So Will, when you're playing this out, are you imagining like physical abuse? Like what's behind the pain that you are illustrating from Whitman?
I think so. The first time I read through it, it was kind of a roller coaster of emotions, because you can really feel, especially great writing, you can feel the pain behind a lot of the lines. And that's not just being, one of the biggest ones that stood out with me was the fact when Walt acknowledges to Song of Comrades that he doesn't even own his poetry. He's convinced that he owes it to his father. And so, I mean, and that really kind of carried this, that was like my theme for this scene, is that the one thing Walt loves and has is not even, he doesn't even think is his. He feels as if his poetry doesn't belong to him. And he feels like his father has taken from him everything that he has. And I imagined, growing up with verbal and physical abuse is something that's going to carry throughout your life. And in this case, Walt's life. And it's a broken down scene to me when I first looked at it. And I couldn't agree with Toby more about how, Walt's constant battle is with himself. It's inner demon after inner demon. And that's the beauty in all the songs, is it's these slowly trying to make these inner demons, that help him, and he's slowly getting rid of them, surely. So I do think that plays a huge part in it, but it is a beautiful, beautiful realization, and a beautiful kind of, it's like he's letting himself now know the truth that, I don't own this, but I need to.
Thank you. And I think what makes it all the more poignant is, Tristan, as you show, I mean, you can credit Whitman Sr. for giving Whitman the idea of a structure, right? Like the idea of building a house of poetry, just right. Because Whitman Sr. was a carpenter, a farmer by inheritance, but became a carpenter. And of course, Whitman followed suit and worked with his father. They were men of, basic, physical labor. So that physical labor got translated into this beautiful poetry. And somehow that's something that Whitman has to wrestle with too, right? He's got this huge inheritance from his dad, but his dad, meanwhile, never really even understood what Whitman was producing with the poetry. So I think, I guess I was going to ask you, and I see that it's 6:55. So there are a whole bunch of questions for you, Tristan, in the chat. So can we just applaud the actors here because they did such an amazing job, and it was such a treat. Thank you so much, guys, for
thank you.
So and so many people in one space. I mean, when does this happen these days? Thank you for syncing up at 6 p.m. And I have so many more questions for you, but I'm not going to monopolize it. I'm going to look at the chat.
And I know some of the actors have to go because they're going to their next rehearsal. So if y'all need to head out, and we will see you. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tristan.
Guys, hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Glad to see you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Oh my goodness, what amazing people. But anyway, Tristan, we only have a few minutes.
Okay.
But I want to throw something at you. I see that Rachel Finney is in the audience. I think that's one of the persons that you credit at the beginning of the play. What's her relationship to you?
Well, she was my French teacher in high school, and it actually turned into, I have an act of becoming best friends with my teachers afterwards. And she is now like my best friend over and over. And I
think I know how that happens, my dear. You're totally lovable and you're such an amazing student. So
thank you. And she, when COVID started, we had amazing plans to read through the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass, and then the world went to chaos. So,
Okay, a shout out to Rachel, who we cannot see here, but she has written a question for you. And she says, Tristan, what specifically about Whitman's life and work has inspired and fascinated you so much? I mean, really, that's a great question. Why this entire play about this one guy?
I think it's because I have struggled my whole life with my learning disability. And even in grad school, it has been a struggle. And this man that came from nothing, had no formal education, found something he loved, and now is labeled as the father of American poetry. He overcome obstacles and what some people would have said, you can't do this. And he found a way to have passion and go through it. So I think it was a way of me working through my own demons of, being a director, getting a master's, being an academic and trying to be a scholar and wanting to teach, but having this learning disability that some see as a deficit. And how can I find my own voice to create art in the reality of my learning disability? So I think that's what really drove this play.
That's really beautiful. I would also think, just because you've gravitated towards Live Oak with Moss and other poems in which Whitman explores sexuality and issues of gender, that Whitman's stance as this very early LGBT spokesperson has a lot to do with it too, right? He's sort of the first voice in America to really bring this to the public.
Well, yeah, I mean, I grew up in the Bible Belt of Texas, and, I knew gay people, but every time I've ever heard something, they were like, this is new, back in my day, this didn't exist. And it just shows this has been around. Love has been around from the beginning. And we just did not have time to sit down and understand it. We didn't have the words, we didn't have the vocabulary. It was nonstop. And I think that's why I gravitate to Whitman too, is like you said, this queer element of a gay man. I've dated women in the past, but I fell in love with a man. And is that right? Is that wrong? And having to battle that conflict, internal conflict.
And I think seeing Whitman having those same questions, but him sharing it openly in the poetry, as he does in Live Oak with Moss, is just super moving. Right. To put that on the page. I feel like when I have taught these poems, they have helped so many people just because Whitman is brave enough to really wrestle with some basic issues of self.
Right. No, I completely agree. I mean, one of the biggest eye-opening things was about Frederick. I learned that
Mhm.
he left Whitman. He got married and had a child,
Right.
but he was in love with Whitman. And it was because of social norms of this, like, can I be who I really need to be?
Hmm.
And I just, I feel like this was a play that worked through my demons while working through Whitman's demons. So it was inspiring to see that someone who lived when he lived in 2020, our lives are still connected in a way. We meet. It's like, what is his famous line at the end of Song of Myself? I sit somewhere waiting for you.
I stopped somewhere waiting for you with
Yeah,
no period at the end, right? He's really
right.
waiting.
So like working on this play made me really realize that Whitman has been stopping waiting for us
Hmm.
this whole time, that he wrote about a future and we are in that future, and he is literally waiting for us to just tap in to what he was writing about then, to understand that this is who we are and it's all very natural.
So beautifully said, right? In so many ways, he's anticipating the LGBT movement that only started happening 100 years after he was writing these poems. But touching on, his pain, his attempts to be brave and forthright about his feelings, and then weaving yourself in there. I really like that this is where we can maybe end the discussion. But as much as this is about Whitman, it is about you and it is about the other people that will enjoy this play. Can you say a word on that? Where can we enjoy the play?
You know, we have to see when COVID ends. It is still in the process. There's going to be workshops, and I have a workshop already planned. And then maybe Karen and I can brainstorm about how we can get this thing on its feet and see how to bring it to life. You know, it's endless world of possibility.
And if there is anybody out there that wants to help you out with this, how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, I mean, find me on Facebook or email me, tristanpullen.director@gmail.com. And I would love to share the script, get feedback, see how you connect to Whitman, and how, if you would want to help this play, figure out how you can be a part of its journey.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we've been speaking with Tristan Pullen on his piece in process. I guess this is still a work in progress, as you're saying, still in draft form. Songs of Memories, a Whitmanic Queer Discovery. Tristan, I love you. You're beautiful. Thank you for coming today and bringing all this young, beautiful energy to the Robust American Love Lecture Speaker Series. Sorry,
Well,
it's
thank
been
you,
such a
Karen.
pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you for having me a part of this amazing organization. So,
Oh,
well,
it's a mutual admiration society. What
sounds
can I
great.
say?
Sounds great. Well,
All
all
right.
right. Well, I guess we'll end it there.
Okay, folks, please join us next week for DQuee's wonderful presentation on Whitman's influence in getting us over this COVID crisis. And we will see you soon. Thank you.
Okay, it ended.
Are you sure?